I'm not here to point fingers. I'm not here to make anybody feel good or feel bad. We are not going to sing Kumbaya. I don't own drums, and I don't even know how to play the guitar. This is not a diversity training. What it is a social justice training. And to me, that's very, very different. Sometimes diversity is not enough. When we start talking about social justice, what's important, I think, is that you need to know how you show up in the world. Some tools that I've learned kind of along the way, and using these tools, it doesn't cost any money. You do not need a committee. You do not need a subcommittee. You do not need a theme party. You don't even need a t-shirt design approved by anyone else. What you can do is your own work. So what I'm going to share with you are some really simple tools that I use. My definition of social justice is knowing who you are and how you show up. That's it. It's super, super simple. You cannot be judgment and assumption free. It is impossible. You could not parallel park without making a judgment or an assumption. You can't do it. It is my job, I believe, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. If you leave this talk comfortable, that's your own damn fault. Really knowing who you are is like picking a cantaloupe at the grocery store when you're totally off the clock and you're just showing up in the world. How do you do that? A really great example, I think, of tokenization is when somebody meets one bad athlete. Oh, all football players, they're all like that, right? That's not nice, and it's not true. And even that one bad football player probably might have just had a bad day. They're not actually a bad person. But that's how we tokenize and generalize. And we all do it, just in different ways. Listen. And I don't mean listen like prepare what you're going to say quietly with the voice in your head and then speak. And I don't mean listen like standing there like, look, I'm completely attentive. I know exactly what you're saying. That's not what I mean. When I say listen, what I'm really talking about is listen to people as if they are wise. Going back to my interpretations of the civil rights movement, it didn't teach people how to think differently. It taught people how to show up differently. It taught us how to show up publicly because this is what we're supposed to do. Oftentimes, when we talk about social justice work, Martin Luther King comes up, Gandhi comes up, Mother Teresa comes up. I am rarely, if ever, compared to those three people. It really does not come up very often. Jessica Pettit, Mother Teresa. Not really paragraphs that are often put together unless it's an accident and cut and pasting or something. What I think is really important, though, is that those three people are usually idolized. They're put up on some kind of pedestal as like the people, and like, I'm no Martin Luther King, what the hell can I do? Right? But that's also an excuse. If you were to read their autobiographies, they'll share with you their mistakes. So Martin Luther King, we'll use him as the first example, in his own work would tell you that he was myopic in view. By focusing just on race, he wasn't as effective as he was when he actually broadened it out to a living wage. If he only focused on racial equity or racial equality, that's a really small group. When he opened it up to living wage, it became a significantly larger group. And I'm a conspiracy theorist. I think that's how he got assassinated. It's because I think that became way more threatening. Threatening to the systems of oppression that are in place, and threatening to the people who are benefiting from those very systems. The more you get to do your own work, the more you get to understand your own core values, and the more you get to know of how you show up in the world, you get to figure out what's congruent and not congruent. It's not a measurement. It's just a constant reflection and figuring out who you are. And with every life experience you have, that changes and molds, and it's really fluid. Those things are deeply connected, and there's a moral question here. And I think the morality of things is actually much easier to grasp. When we talk about systematic oppression or systemic oppression, which we're talking about economics and politics and things like that, what's important to recognize is that that's all made up. All of these systems have been generated and created by human beings. And if the human beings could have some understanding of how it is they show up in the world, then I think each one of us would be able to ring more true with our integrity, but not out of protection. How many of you familiar with the Gandhi quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world"? Usually, most people are familiar. Sometimes people have even had it like tattooed on their bodies, right? Because this is a quote that we really like. It makes us feel good. I think the quote's kind of bullshit. I told you I'm not a diversity trainer. I don't want to see the change. I want to be the change. Most diversity trainings aren't helpful. I have taken out of diversity trainings, for example, you are never supposed to laugh at an inappropriate joke. Have you heard this? Do you want to know what sucks about that? Inappropriate jokes are really funny. How are you not supposed to laugh at them if they're funny? Maybe like mid-laughter, you're like, ooh, that was a bad joke, I shouldn't be laughing at that. That was really funny. What's the punchline again? So in 1712, Willie Lynch comes out with this theory. The theory was that you need to create a system where these people down here are doing whatever it is they're doing so that the only person they can trust is the slave owner. That's a tall order. So when going into it a little bit more, Willie Lynch says that you need to pit the slaves against each other. Whether it's house slaves versus field slaves, light skin, dark skin, adult, children, men, women, this plantation versus that plantation. If you can pit them against each other, they'll be so busy trying to figure out where they measure up down here that not only will they trust the slave owner, but they'll even thank him. All right, I'll give it a whirl, says the slave owner. Willie Lynch suggested that this would last for about 300 years. It's 2010, so probably with the Mayans' approval, we have 2 years left to stop doing this. The reason why I think this is so important is because we are pitting ourselves against people all the time. There's athletes versus non-athletes. Within athletes, there's all the different teams. Men's sports versus women's sports, and then the sports within those categories. There's Greek life, fraternities and sororities versus independence. And then within Greeks, there's all the different fraternities and all the different sororities. There's hard sciences versus soft sciences. This campus versus the campus across the street. There's financial aid receiving students and people who write checks for tuition. There's men versus women. There's straight people versus everybody else. In everybody else, there's gay versus lesbian, and gay and lesbian versus bisexual. There's Christian versus everybody else. And Christian in this context typically means Protestant-based. So when you get over here to everybody else, the Catholics seem to have a leg up, and then it's everybody else. If we can stop pitting ourselves against each other, I believe we will have already dismantled oppression. The system that is currently in place is in place because we're letting it stay there. We're so busy fighting against each other that we're thanking the system for putting it in place. James Larkin, who's a famous union activist in Ireland, has a really powerful quote that I say to myself over and over and over again every day. And that is, "The great appear great because we are on our knees. Let's rise."